Erica Williams, as those of you know, is the chair of the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. She has had an illustrious career. You can see her full bio on the PCAOB website, as you know, but I try not to because I feel it makes me feel a little bit worse about myself and the things that I've accomplished or haven't accomplished during the same time. The one thread I can tell from working with Chair Williams the time she's been here, if you look back through her career, there has been a common thread of public service, whether it's been her time starting off as a enforcement attorney at the SEC to then working with a number of different SEC chairs, again, and for the protection of investors, to working in the White House counsel's office. Her commitment to public service has come through, and since I have been had the opportunity to work with her, it's something that I've really noticed as well. And again, at the PCAOB, our mission is to protect investors. So again, it continues that public service thread, as I mentioned, and it's really been inspiring for us as a staff to see her in the role as chair, redoubling our efforts to protect investors, reinvigorating the staff, and being happy to work here. She really feels strongly about supporting us in our efforts to protect investors, and it's been inspiring for all of us to work with her in that regard. And I know that you feel the same way. I think one of our former colleague of mine on our staff, who's not a board member, George Bodick, talks about how auditing is a noble profession, and then ultimately you serve the interest of investors as well. And when we are all rowing in the same direction, if it's the PCAOB staff, or the PCAOB board, or the auditors looking out to protecting investors, it's really when we're at our best. And as I said, it's been inspiring and very rewarding to work with Chair Williams and her staff and the rest of the board, as she's really been able to reinvigorate what the board is all about in the pursuit of our mission to protect investors, which I know you all agree with as well. So without that, I feel like the technology is working now perfectly, and so it's my pleasure to introduce to you Chair Williams to make some remarks, and then, like I said, we'll continue on with the Q&A session because she's been so committed to making this work, even though she hasn't been able to be here today. So, Erica, can you hear me? Over to you.
I can. Thank you, Kent, for that very kind introduction. I'm very sorry that I'm not able to be there with you today in person. I recently had an exposure to COVID and unfortunately tested positive shortly before I was scheduled to take my flight to Chicago. So while I'm feeling fine, the only thing that really doesn't feel good is the fact that I'm not able to be there with you, and I'm extremely disappointed that I'm not going to be able to meet you all in person. I am looking forward, though, to being able to take your questions, and I know that you are in very good hands with the team that we have there today. Again, thank you to Kent and the rest of our Office of Communications and Engagement, in particular, Brian Goodnow, for their work in putting this event together. And I also have to recognize our expert staff from the Office of Chief Auditor and our Division of Registration and Inspections and Enforcement and Investigations, who will be leading an in-depth discussion today with you in person. And then finally, I want to thank the staff from both the SEC and FINRA who are going to be participating in the forum. To everyone in Chicago and watching online, on behalf of the PCAOB, a very warm welcome. It's my pleasure to begin today's forum with a few remarks, but first I also must provide the standard disclaimer that the views that I express here are my own and not necessarily those of the PCAOB board members or our talented and dedicated staff. At the PCAOB, we have always appreciated the importance of auditors of small businesses and broker-dealers. Small public companies are essential to our economy, driving job creation and innovation, and broker-dealers facilitate the efficient functioning of our capital markets. Auditors of small businesses and broker-dealers are just as essential. In these dynamic and occasionally volatile segments of the marketplace, auditors can apply solid expertise that is grounded in professional judgment, care, and skepticism. Effective auditing strengthens the reliability of financial information, which is so important to protecting investors. Recognizing this key role, the PCAOB has held forums for auditors of small businesses since 2004 and broker-dealers since 2011. And this year, my fellow board members and I are hosting a series of 5 in-person forums across the country. I'm thrilled to be kicking off that effort here with you in Chicago. And today we will share resources and information designed to support your work and help improve audit quality. We are also eager to hear your views and questions. Before we get there, though, I'd like to set the stage by touching on 2 things. First, I want to give you a big picture view of the work our staff is doing to advance our mission. And second, I want to share a few thoughts on how the PCAOB stays mindful of smaller firm challenges as we pursue that work. Let's start with the big picture. The PCAOB is working hard on many fronts to advance the mission that the U.S. Congress gave us back in 2002, to protect investors and further the public interest in the preparation of informative, accurate, and independent audit reports. 2.5 years ago, our board adopted a new strategic plan to advance the mission and guide our efforts through 2026. The plan has 4 simple but essential goals: modernizing our standards, enhancing our inspections, strengthening our enforcement, and improving our organizational effectiveness. The talented and dedicated PCAOB staff has been firing on all cylinders to advance each of these goals. And I'm so glad that they will have a chance to brief you today on those efforts. First, we're modernizing our standards and rules, many of which haven't been substantially revisited in years, if not decades. Last year, the board took more formal actions on standard setting and rulemaking than any year since 2013. The work continues in 2024. So far this year, we've issued 3 proposals to modernize, clarify, streamline, and strengthen our rules and standards. We've also adopted new standards and amendments through 2 projects that have been informed by robust input from a wide variety of stakeholders, including small firms. We understand that small firms have unique needs and challenges. We want to ensure our rules and standards are scalable for firms of all sizes. That is reflected on our recently adopted quality control standard. We know that risks vary from firm to firm. An effective QC system should too. A one-size-fits-all approach is not the best way to keep investors protected. So the proposed standard requires all registered firms to identify their specific risks and design a QC system that includes policies and procedures to guard against those risks. Similarly, the recently adopted project related to general responsibilities of the auditor in conducting an audit includes amendments that require firms to assemble a complete and final set of audit documentation for retention not more than 14 days after the report release date. We understand that while many large firms are already operating within this window, smaller firms may need more time to make that change. So we are taking a phased-in approach to implementation. Second, on inspections, we are not just inspecting hundreds of registered firms around the world each year, we're sharing more of our inspection information and observations than ever. This sharing is happening through enhanced inspection reports, new features on our website, and through new publications with helpful insights. I'll return to this point in a moment. Third, we are strengthening enforcement, which is a pillar of our oversight. Strong enforcement helps us send the message that there will be consequences for anyone who puts investors at risk by breaking the rules. In April of this year, we announced the largest civil money penalty in the history of the PCAOB, a $25 million fine against KPMG Netherlands for violations of PCAOB rules and quality control standards related to exam cheating and misinforming investigators. Finally, we are focused on improving the PCAOB's own organizational effectiveness. A big component of achieving this strategic goal is enhancing our engagement with our stakeholders. And it's that desire to better engage that has brought me and my colleagues with you here today in Chicago. So now let's zoom in on the topic of the day, auditing in the small business and broker-dealer environments. We all know that the biggest global networks tend to get most of the attention in the media and elsewhere. At the PCAOB, we don't just pay attention to the big firms. We stay mindful of smaller firms, meaning those that issue audit reports or that play a substantial role in the audits of 100 or fewer issuers. The PCAOB expects firms in this category at least once every 3 years. We're focused on smaller firms because they are such an important part of the auditing landscape. Today, there are more than 500 triennially inspected PCAOB registered audit firms that either audit or play a substantial role in the audits of over 3,200 public company issuers. As it relates to the audits of broker-dealers, more than 280 registered firms audit approximately 3,300 SEC registered broker-dealers. So how do we maintain a sharp awareness of smaller firms? One way is through research. Of course, we are continually monitoring developments with smaller firms through our inspections. Those inspections help inform our rulemaking and standard setting activity. But that's not the only way we get smaller firms' perspectives. We also get input from representatives of smaller firms who serve as members of our Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group, or SEAG, and we engage with smaller firms in other settings, such as conferences or even occasionally through interviews and other direct outreach. Alongside this engagement, an integral element of our standard setting and rulemaking is economic analysis. Our economists and analysts always consider the impact of our rulemaking actions on smaller firms because we know that certain issues, such as high fixed implementation costs, tend to have a bigger impact on smaller firms. In this vein, we do additional analysis when it comes to emerging growth companies. These companies tend to use smaller auditors more frequently than larger issuers do. All this research and outreach shapes our proposals, but the process doesn't end there. Once we proposed a new standard or amended standard or rule, we look for more perspective through the public comment process. We encourage small firms to give us their unique perspectives. This input is incredibly valuable for us, and it shows up in our rules and standards. The recently adopted projects related to quality control and general responsibilities of the auditor in conducting an audit that I mentioned earlier are just two examples. Once a new standard, rule, or related amendments becomes effective, we don't stop considering the views of smaller firms. Through surveys and other means, we continue gathering information about the impact of our rules on firms of all sizes. We want to know how implementation is going and whether any challenges are developing. How about inspections? As I mentioned, our inspectors don't just look for audit deficiencies, they're continually sharing their knowledge to help firms improve audit quality. You will see that drive for improvement in our actions today as our inspectors will share experiences, illustrative examples, and good practices that can help firms that audit small businesses or broker-dealers. I'll also point to our Spotlight publications, which don't just present our inspection findings, they also share good practices that we've observed. To take one example, consider our January Spotlight entitled Insights into the PCAOB's Interim Inspection Program related to audits of broker-dealers. This spotlight rightly emphasizes that overall deficiency rates in broker-dealer engagements remains unacceptably high. We need to see improvement, and that's why the spotlight also provides insights that can help auditors address challenges such as deficiencies related to an insufficient understanding of the broker-dealer industry or lack of professional skepticism. Even more recently, we released a spotlight focused on root cause analysis, which can help firms identify and correct the underlying causes of deficiencies to improve audit quality moving forward. This is just the first of many spotlights designed to provide insights and resources for all firms, but small firms in particular. Overall, we have more than double the number of spotlight publications issued on an annual basis under this board. Let me close by repeating what I said earlier. Auditors of smaller businesses and broker-dealers play an essential role in our economy, in our markets, and in protecting investors. At the PCAOB, we want to help auditors play that role to the best of their ability for the benefit of investors. I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Well, thanks again, Chair Williams. And before we get into the Q&A session, I just wanted to raise, we're not going to have slides bringing them up, so I'll just read off for y'all. The first CPE code for this session is 994. 994. And then one last time, the CPE code, the first CPE code for this session is 994. Great. Well, Chair Williams, I'm not sure how much when were you getting on board? I mentioned some of your background and the commitment throughout that obvious to me when I go through your work history, I guess for lack of a better word, the common thread being sort of a commitment to public service and to giving back. So I wondered, maybe for those of you, and this is the first time a number of these folks may have seen you either virtually or otherwise, what is it about your background initially that got you interested in pursuing the careers that led you here and then coming to the PCAOB?
That's a great question, Kent. And I often talk about my path to the PCAOB and the fact that it starts with my grandmother. So my grandmother and grandfather were farmers in rural Alabama, Plantersville, Alabama. And my grandmother used to keep her money under a mattress because she didn't trust the banks, let alone the stock market. I remember it distinctly. And I also remember that, money under mattresses doesn't grow. Like, you have to invest it. And so when I graduated from law school and had gotten a little experience under my belt, I decided to pursue a position at the SEC because I wanted to do my part to hold wrongdoers accountable. And I wanted to help breed trust in our financial markets. And so that's what led me to the SEC. I believe that confidence in our markets is something that we can build by protecting investors, and protecting investors, of course, is what this work is all about, from people who are saving for retirement to parents who need to save to put their kids through college to anyone who really depends on the capital markets to pursue their own version of the American dream. I always say that quality audits protect people, and it is protecting people that motivates me and our talented staff every day. And, it's something that, of course, drives our work. So that's a little bit about my path.
No, I appreciate that. And I think hopefully that folks here, either online or in person, appreciate learning a little more about you and what drives you. I mean, I think you mentioned in your speech, too, the ambitious standard-setting agenda, and it's clear that part of what's driving that is your background and your commitment to serving investors is the mission that Congress set out to us. I guess it would be probably helpful for folks, including both here in person and online, is why the standard-setting agenda and what's motivating more about why the board is driven to moving this agenda forward.
Sure. So when the PCAOB got off the ground back in 2003, it adopted standards that had been set by the auditing profession. And those standards were supposed to be in place for a temporary period of time. They were called interim standards. Now, more than 20 years later, too many of those interim standards are still in place and have not been updated. But the capital markets don't stand still. Issues emerge, technology advances, and this board and I believe that our standards must keep up with that. So that is why we set this ambitious standard setting agenda. Nearly all the standards that we are considering are those interim standards. And last year, as I mentioned, the board took more formal actions on standard setting and rulemaking than in any of the previous 10 years. Last week, that continued with our adoption of the quality control and what we call AS 1000 standard. And, while we are moving forward to try to update the standards, our goal is really to get it right. So more important than moving forward is moving forward in the right way. And critical to that is the comments that we receive and especially the comments from the smaller audit firms, which, as I noted, we very much consider and we took into consideration in these two recent adoptions, and that we consider in every standard setting and rulemaking project. For me, I often think about a quote from Senator Sarbanes, who said that, when things seem to be going well, people forget about how bad it was back at the time, and that maintaining high standards is a tough job. And we believe at the PCAOB that that's our job, and that's what investors require. So we're going to continue to focus on modernizing our standards for the protection of investors.
Great. You mentioned both in your remarks and here right in your answer as well, when pursuing the standard setting agenda, the opportunity for stakeholder input, which is sort of our jargon for outside interest, whether it's small auditors, large auditors, investors, public company issuer, financial executives, audit committee members, to really play a role in that proposal process, the standard setting process, through comments and other formats. So I was wondering, what's the best way for those of you, or for those here who might be interested in weighing in on what the board's doing, what's the best way for them to engage from a stakeholder, again, our jargon, our stakeholder perspective, to weigh in and make their voices heard into what the board's pursuing?
So public comment is essential to our standard setting and rulemaking agenda, and we really do want to hear from all stakeholders. After we issue a proposal, we have what we call an open comment period, generally lasts for about 60 days. And during that time, there are a wide variety of ways that stakeholders can provide comments to us. They can send in letters through mail, they can email them. There are a variety of ways that through electronic means that you can submit the comment. And we on LinkedIn always promote the fact that the comment period is open. And we really do read and weigh every single comment that we receive. And we take them all very seriously. And so I just want to encourage those individuals out there who are interested in providing comments to please take the time to do so. Even if a comment is short, it still can be very useful to us. And the other thing that we have, this board has reimagined our approach to stakeholder input. And so through two ways we've done that. Number one, we have, as I mentioned, these advisory groups that we reconstituted. That was one of the first major actions of the board. So we have our Standards and Emerging Issues Advisory Group and our Investor Advisory Group. And through that, we are receiving comments, including from the small firm perspective. And then we have a new investor advocate, Saba Kumar, who is someone who's always reaching out to investors and others to make sure that we're hearing their viewpoint. And then we also have a stakeholder liaison in Todd Cranford, who also is a very good resource, especially for firms of all sizes. And if you have any comments, you can also reach out to the two of them.
Great. I do have one question that I know is going to be of particular interest to at least half of the small business broker-dealer auditor audience. But before we get to that, I wanted to let folks know the next CPE code for this session is 870. 870. And one final time, the next CPE code for this session is 870. And just a reminder to feel free to bring in any questions you might have through the Conferences IO app. See a few coming in, which we'll get to as well. But the next question, as I was building it up, was what is the status of the broker-dealer program and any potential plans the board might have in establishing a permanent inspection program for auditors or broker-dealers?
Thank you for that question. I'm sure that is top of mind for several of participants. Our broker-dealer inspection program is a critical part of the work that we do to protect investors. It is working really well, and we are not planning to have any changes to the program at this time. I am always impressed by our staff and our broker-dealer inspection program. They're doing excellent work, and they'll continue to do so.
Great. Given sort of the hybrid nature of this event, Yeah, I think it's appropriate to ask, what are the board's plans for in-person or remote inspections, both this year and beyond? What are the plans for those moving forward?
Sure. So, as you know, we conduct inspections around the globe. Our non-U.S. inspections are, for the most part, in person. The only time when that doesn't happen is if there are safety or security issues that could impact the safety of our staff. And then we have been doing a hybrid approach to our domestic inspections, and that is going to continue. So we're going to have a mix of remote and in-person inspections in the U.S.
Great. And then I'm just going to get to one that has come in since. This is the in-between space between what I can read with my glasses or not. So I'm going to hold for at least what so will the PCAOB provide implementation and training sessions to assist practitioners performing audits in compliance with standards? Did you get that okay? I can read it again.
I did, yeah, no,
Okay.
That's a great question. So
Great.
in part, that is one of the reasons that we decided to hold these forums around the country this year. I think that this is an excellent opportunity for us to provide some of that training on the standards that have been implemented thus far. We are always looking for additional ways to provide information and guidance to firms, and we will take that back and continue to do so. I know that one thing that we've done not too long ago was a video series on our other auditor standard, but as we have more standards coming online, we will always be considering additional ways to provide implementation guidance, but these forums are an excellent way for us to do that. So this is one way that we will continue to provide that guidance. Thank you for that question.
Great, thank you. And I will, I'm going to dive in a little bit more on broker-dealer question for the folks gathered here as well. How does the PCAOB inspection staff determine which firms to inspect and broker-dealer audits to review?
Sure. So by statute, we have to inspect firms that audit more than 100 issuers every year and other firms triannually. And we do the triennial inspections on a rolling basis. What we're doing when we decide which firms to inspect and which engagements to look at is we have both a mix of risk-based and random selections. And we are also thinking about, and our inspection staff is also considering potential risks to customer funds and securities. And that's something that they prioritize. But generally, it's a mix of risk-based and random selection, of course, always complying with the statutory requirement for how often firms need to be inspected.
Right. And during your comments and in the past as well, you've talked about the recent rise in deficiency rates from PCAOB inspection findings across all different firms, not just the smaller firms, but the larger firms as well. Could you share more about what the PCAOB is doing to improve audit quality?
Absolutely. So we are really using every tool in our toolbox to try to drive improvement in the audit quality and get these deficiency rates to be lowered. I'll talk about a few ways that we're doing that. So first, transparency. We, of course, make our inspection reports public. I have been, and so have other members of our staff, highlighting the fact that the deficiency rates are what I think of right now as being unacceptably high. We are providing more opportunity for people to compare deficiency rates in firms through enhancements on our website. And I really do believe that when firms compete on quality, quality improves. So we'll continue to shine a light there. Second, we have been working with audit committees. Every year, our inspection staff meets with audit committee chairs. Last year, they met with 200 audit committee chairs. We have put out a spotlight that includes information and questions that audit committee chairs should be asking their auditors. And we think that audit committees, as clients, can do a really good job at providing accountability. And so we want to make sure that we're out there empowering audit committees as they go about the work of overseeing the work of the auditor. The remediation process is something that we're very focused on. Our team spends a lot of time with audit firms, providing feedback on the ways that they're remediating their quality control deficiencies and providing them a real opportunity to improve. So I think the remediation is a key way that we can provide information. And quality control is a foundation for every audit. When it improves, generally speaking, overall audit quality improves. I mentioned that we have been putting out more spotlights than ever before. So spotlights are a publication to audit firms that include really valuable insights, key risks, good practices. And one of the things that we're trying to make sure that we're doing is considering spotlights that can be very impactful to the firms. We recently put out one on root cause analysis. And I think that spotlight was very, very well received, and we're always considering what additional information we can provide so that firms can use that information to hopefully correct issues that they're having and improve audit quality and lower deficiency rates. And then we are also this year doing a culture review. So that's a look at the tone at the top of firms and how that tone at the top can influence audit quality. We are not yet done with this first culture review. I will say that our staff has done more than 100 interviews, and we've collected a lot of useful information from firms. Those observations should be out soon, and I'm hopeful that that is also providing information that firms can use to improve their audit quality. And then finally, I'll mention this forum. Being able to come to these forums around the country, have people meet in person, have our staff provide valuable insights and good practices that they are seeing and answering questions directly from key stakeholders like our small firms is really valuable. And that's something that we're going to continue to focus on in the future. So those are just a few areas.
That's great. And I do want to get back on and ask you a follow-up on the spotlight on root cause analysis, but I'm just sticking with the issue of deficiencies. Again, sorry, everyone, we're going to talk about deficiencies. Again, what are some of the, what types of deficiencies are contributing to the rising rates we're seeing, particularly for the smaller firms and firms auditing broker-dealers? What are some of the deficiencies that you could highlight?
Sure. So we're seeing increased deficiency rates in a few specific areas. And it's both for small firms and really large firms as well. So really across our inspection programs. Those areas are revenue, long-lived assets, inventory, goodwill and intangible assets. Do they relate to business combinations, equity, and allowance for credit losses? And many of the deficiencies that we're seeing in those areas relate to ICFR and auditing for estimates. And then for broker dealers, we are also seeing some deficiency rates that relate to broker dealer engagements generally. And we see some in the financial statement audit engagements and reviews of broker dealer exemption reports. And we've also seen some related to quality control. So, particularly in the area of engagement quality review.
Gotcha. And then, as I said, I want to get back onto the spotlight on root cause analysis. But before I do that, the third CPE code for this session is 150. 150. And then one final time, the third of the 4 CPE codes that we'll have for this session is 150. So as you talked about, Chair Williams, both in your remarks and here in the conversation we've had, you highlighted the new Spotlight document for auditors related to root cause analysis. Can you give just, I guess, a few highlights of the recommendations in the report that might be helpful to this crowd and those viewing for online?
Sure. So I think the root cause analysis spotlight is extremely useful. It doesn't have, prescriptive directives in there, but some thoughts as to and feedback on what we've seen that seems to be working well, both for large firms and then specifically for small firms. So two areas that I'll point out. Number one is dedicated teams. We often see large firms have like specific teams that are responsible for considering root cause analysis, and that can be they can be part-time or full-time with respect to this role, but they're bringing relevant experience and background with respect to this. And we found that a diverse team with a variety of perspectives can be really useful in trying to drill down on what some of the root causes are. But for small firms, even just having an individual or really small team that is responsible for periodically, maybe a few times during the year, considering root cause analysis, especially when some of the methodology and process updates are coming to bear on a firm, that can be useful. So number one is having at least an individual or some sort of team. It doesn't have to be a particular size. And then the second area that we have seen be useful in root cause analysis is through guidance and training. Now, of course, a lot of the big firms have developed well-documented guidance and processes for their professionals for root cause analysis. And a lot of the smaller firms we see perhaps using a third-party service for this. What we have found, though, is if the firms that are using the third-party service periodically could tailor the subscription of that methodology based on what they're seeing in their unique needs of their firm, that can be beneficial. So I really do encourage all of you to take a look at that spotlight for more details, but those are two areas that I'll highlight today.
Great, thanks. I want to talk a little bit more about enforcement and standard setting. But before we do that, you mentioned in your comments, your remarks at the outset, how the capital markets are dynamic, they're changing, and there's always innovation that we need to keep up with. But the audit firm market itself is dynamic, it's changing, and the way that firms structure themselves and perform their work. So one of the things, at least that I've noticed in headlines, is the private equity investments and other alternative practice structures that firms are engaging in. So what are your views, the PCAOB views on private equity investments, alternative practice structures that some audit firms are undertaking?
Yeah, this is a really important issue, and it's one that we're keeping our eye focused on. And there are many reasons that firms may decide to pursue different structures. That's not something that we are weighing in on with respect to business decisions. The one thing that we want to make sure is that no matter the structure that firms are pursuing, they're continuing to comply with the PCAOB rules and standards. And the rules that I think of and standards that I really want to make sure that firms are paying careful attention to are those related to independence. As you know, accountants and auditors are required to be independent both in fact and appearance. And so as firms are pursuing strategies, that's a question that they should be asking, whether there are any incentives or conflicts related to that or inherent in those new structures. And firms may want to consider, as this structural shift is continuing, whether or not there's any change in the culture of the firm or the tone at the top. But again, this is some area that we are really focused on, and we're really just focused on it from a perspective of under these new structures, are firms complying with PCAOB rules and standards?
I'm getting the 5-minute warning, so now I'm giving it to you as well, but I do want to get to a couple final questions that have come in, or a couple questions that we want to get to. But before I do that, the fourth and final CPE code for this session is 792. 792. And then again, that's 792. Chair Williams, you talked about in your remarks both your background as an enforcement attorney and then beginning your career as an enforcement attorney, and then most specifically to this audience, the enforcement program since this current board took over. You continue to break records for enforcement penalties under your leadership, and I guess the question is, do you believe the increased enforcement action is making a difference in audit quality?
Sure, so thanks for that question. As I mentioned in response to one of the earlier questions, I was an enforcement litigator at the SEC for 7 years. During that time, I literally had investors call me who had been swindled out of their life savings and Ponzi schemes. And I will really never forget that experience. I really take those stories with me, and it guides some of the thinking behind enforcement, which is we want to make sure that people know that there are consequences for putting investors at risk. And that's one of the reasons that the board has focused on strengthening enforcement. We believe that deterrence is critical, and deterrence drives accountability. And so under this board, I think there's no question that we've sent a strong message that if you put investors at risk, there will be tough consequences, and that we're not going to be tied to the types of cases that we brought in the past or the types of penalties that we have received. At the same time, I do want to make it clear that we're not driving towards any numbers. Our staff and in the Division of Enforcement and Investigations, they look at the facts and circumstances of every case, and then they decide based on the facts and circumstances in the law on what the appropriate cases are to bring that they're going to recommend to the board and what the appropriate relief is. And that varies from case to case, and all of it is focused on deterrence and protection of investors.
Great. I think we have time for one last, but I'm going to make sure one that's actually two. So we'll do this. And this is what you talked a lot about. We've talked a lot about you've talked a lot about the ambitious standard setting agenda that the board has. One of the standard setting proposals items that garnered a lot of attention is the board's proposal regarding non-compliance with laws and regulations, or NOCLAR. So it's gained a lot of interest. And in response to that, PCAOB staff recently reopened the comment period and held public roundtable to collect more input. So I guess two-part question would be, why did you feel, holding that roundtable and reopening the comment period was important? What did you learn from it? And then what are the next steps as you envision, or the board might envision, or any timelines that you might not have in mind for that in particular, as I know it's been of interest to a lot of folks?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So when it comes to NOCLAR, I think that just with every standard setting and rulemaking project, public comment is essential. And it is something that we are very interested in. As you note, we had a lot of interest in the NOCLAR proposal. We read and considered every comment, but there were a few areas where we felt that the staff felt that there were some areas where they could benefit from additional comment. And as I mentioned, our goal here is to get this right, as it is with every standard setting and rulemaking project. And so there were 3 areas where the staff felt that they could benefit from additional information. One of them was related to the identification of NOCLAR. The other was assessment, auditor's assessment of noncompliance with laws and regulations, and then the costs and benefits of the proposal. And so the staff reopened the comment period, specifically asking about those 3 areas, but they were welcoming any comments on any other areas of the proposal as well. And we held a roundtable, and I think we were really lucky to have a wide variety of stakeholders participate and experts in this area. And we received a lot of valuable information. The staff is still going through the comments that we've received during the comment period and the information that we received during the roundtable. And so it is too soon for me to be able to tell you exactly what is going to happen. Of course, the board votes on recommendations from the staff. And so until the staff has analyzed the information, provided the board with a recommendation, the board doesn't actually move forward to act. I will say one takeaway that I had from the roundtable is that while there are definitely a wide variety of perspectives, there was a lot of opportunity for agreement that I saw through that roundtable. And, I look forward to receiving the recommendation from the staff whenever it is ready. Again, we're not on any timetable.
Well, thank you. Chair Williams, thank you for the time. Thank you for the extra effort you put into making this happen, given what happened yesterday. So we hope you are on the mend. And again, appreciate the time that you spent with us today. So take care, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to participate. And again, I'm sorry I'm not there in person. Have a good rest of the forum.
Great, thank you.